Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Is a high school diploma enough to be successful in today's workforce? President Biden is saying our K-12 education system needs to be reformed, that it's not working as well as it needs to. He's calling for free pre-K and free grades 13 and 14, so 2 years after and 2 years before our current system. We are talking with Dr. William Doyle, public policy and higher education professor at Vanderbilt University. And I've enjoyed our conversation. And my question to you is, how likely do you think it is? Maybe this passes, maybe this doesn't pass. Have you heard this being debated in your circles for a long time prior to this? Did this surprise you? And how likely is some kind of reform in our education system in the next 10 years, whether it's this or something else? So I ask you all that.
Yeah. So, the conversation around paying for higher education, and so, financial aid, all the different grants that we can give to people, that's an area that I've worked in for a long time. And most of the time we had conversations that were more kind of like tweaking the system. Let's make this a little better. Let's make that a little better. But there were a set of analysts and kind of activists, including Sarah Goldrick-Rab, who's a professor at Temple, who started saying, you know what, college should be free. And when they said that, a lot of us were like, like it really wasn't part of the conversation up until, recently, the last 5 or 10 years. That despite the fact what I was talking about, 30 or 40 years ago, for a lot of people, it was free or more nearly free. So, but that idea has really gained traction. And in particular, I do think that the experience of states like Tennessee, and Tennessee really has been a leader in this, and with the Tennessee Promise program offering free community college for recent high school graduates, seeing that it worked, it's, we've seen, big increases in the number of people getting ready to go to college and going to college since the Promise program's been in place. It really has changed the national conversation. So there's, that is something that was rarely discussed 10 years ago has now become very commonplace to entertain as an idea for, how we should pay for college. So, who knows what's going to happen in Congress? I do not prognosticate on those issues. But these pressures are not going away. So the demand for the labor market for more highly educated people, combined with these increasing prices of higher education, those two trends aren't going anywhere. And so there's going to continue to be pressure on politicians to do something about this. This has got to be why they're talking about it, right? Politicians talk about things when their constituents start pushing. And there's definitely a lot of pressure across the board to do something about these prices of college. So it may or may not be this particular initiative, but I do think at the state level, we're going to continue to see a lot of states pursuing something like what Tennessee has done. And at the federal level, I think there's going to be continued pressure to address this issue and to make it so that people can afford to go. It's the same kind of thing with healthcare, right? That whatever policy solution people might or might not favor, those pressures, the incredible expense of healthcare, something that we absolutely need, that's not going to go away. It's just like that with college. This is getting more expensive, and it's something that we need, and people are going to expect the government to do something about it.
Yeah. This won't go away. No doubt about it. Okay, let's go to Lucy. Hello, Lucy.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Well, the Tennessee Promise, from what I understand, that kind of got its funds from the Pell Grant money of somehow or another, and it's basically like a Pell Grant, and there's nothing new under the sun there to me. To go back a bit, in 1980, from what I remember, Nashville Tech was $10 an hour. You could go over there and take a certificate course like in television production and go to work for Channel 5 and host Open Line one day. I mean,
sure
all kinds of stuff they had over there. But it was $10 an hour, community college. Austin P was $10 an hour. They were on quarters. MTSU was $15 an hour. At the most, if you had took a full load 12 hours, you had 4 courses, your books might run you $70 or $80. You see what I'm saying? And anything over 12 credit hours, up to 21 hours, anything past 12 was free. You know, it just came with, if you can do it, do it. But that's when you could also make minimum wage and live in a house apartment and go to school. So somebody got it in their head that was an entitlement. And I really think what I witnessed was that when they started making school loans, Wall Street financial product with derivatives, that's when it went nuts. And I think that comes from people like Abbie Hoffman and those guys that started the free speech movement at Berkeley that said, you know, it was free to go to school in California, still I think up until the 80s, and Texas, but they started this thing saying these entrance exams discriminate because of the way that you disperse public education funds, and a lot of these people aren't prepared to go take this exam. You know, we had a janitor here in the lab at Vanderbilt University that taught doctors, this is a lab technician, at Johns Hopkins surgical procedures, hands-on. And they finally recognized this guy, and I think he might have had a high school education from the 1920s. But back when I was coming up, a high school education was not enough. But what did we have, like here in Nashville? Because Nashville was big about education when I was coming up. They were really big on it. Now they're big about liquor tax, you know. But we had...
You're talking about the price, the market increases.
We had night school, post-high school education, and here's another thing that they quit doing. You could have a high school education, you go in and take an aptitude test, and the employer would sit there and have in-house training in a whole HR department. Wow. They teach you basic electric, welding, all kinds of stuff.
All right, well, let's talk about that.
They don't do that anymore.
So
we pay for all that.
Things have changed dramatically. All right, what do you think there?
So there's a couple of things. I absolutely agree that there's so many people out there with so much talent that if we could get them into college and give them a couple of years of training, they could do so much in this world. There's just, you know, we've got to, you know, finding a system to make sure that we can, you know, develop and recognize that talent is so important. We continue to have the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, the you know, affectionately known as the TCATs, and they do these really applied programs. You know, the TCAT in Nashville does things like aviation maintenance, advanced manufacturing, but also things like early childhood education and practical nursing. So all these really, you know, these degrees that there's a lot of demand for them, and employers really respond. The state's done a pretty good job. Tennessee is a leader on this. The state's done a pretty good job of making sure a lot of people can go and get those certificates and degrees pretty cheap. There's these different programs that make that possible. But that, you know, there is an advantage, and the promise has helped with this, to say, you know what, you know, if you're in high school, you should just know this is there and it's going to be free. So yeah, there's it did used to be a lot less expensive, and what that did was got a lot of people, you know, into good jobs. And I think that we should, you know, think what we can do for this next generation to make that happen for them as well.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Lucy. All right, we'll take a break. Come back right after this.